Hi, I'm Thomas with Believe in the Run.
And this is Megan with Believe in the Run.
And this is Megan with Featherstone Nutrition.
AKA Feathers. And it's starting to stick.
It is.
Oh, it is sticking. I keep getting people like, hey, Feathers, I got a question for you. I'm like, there it is.
Nice.
There it is.
I love it. I was able to your parents got to name you, and then I got to name you.
It's only a matter of time until I say, and it's Feathers from Featherstone Nutrition.
I like it. Oh, yeah. So if you don't know why we're here, this is our bi-weekly podcast where we cover nutrition and running stuff and some foolishness we get into. So buckle up. Here we go. This one I'm excited about because it contains something that I'm very fond of. Like, I have two hobbies in my life. One is running and one is recovering from drinking.
I don't think that this counts as recovery.
Okay, it doesn't count as recovery. Anyway, we're going to tackle some questions about alcohol and running and nutrition and how it affects the whole, I guess, biosphere of running and health and all that stuff. And also, there was news this week, Feathers, that I wanted to cover because you push salt. And now the FDA or somebody was like, hey, Americans are eating way too much salt. And I'm like, I'm finally feeling better because I am eating more salt. So maybe it's for a certain segment of the population they need to cut back on salt, you couch potatoes. And maybe for us runners or active people, it's okay. Let's talk about the salt because I saw this and I've heard my whole life that, basically salt is poison. As a person who prefers salt over sugar, that's disturbing. It's like they're hating on my people. And so I was like, why is salt so bad? Since I've been taking in more salt and hydrating and stuff, it seems like I'm performing better. Why is the FDA jumping in right now and telling people it's bad?
So, I think this is another good example of us runners. We like to feel special. We like to feel different. And this is another example of runners being special and different because we need more salt. And it all goes back to that we lose salt in our sweat. So to your point, Thomas, someone sitting on the couch who's not sweating, if they consume too much salt, some people end up with high blood pressure. There's also some studies that show if we consume too much salt on a daily basis, it can harden our arteries, and we don't want hard arteries. It's not good for our cardiovascular health. But when we look at runners in particular, if we're losing all of this salt in our sweat, which, if we look at the average salt loss for people who are super sweaty, right, it could be anywhere between 1 and 2 grams per hour. I mean, the FDA is telling people to take in 2,300 milligrams or less, but there's runners who are losing that in an hour of running in the heat in the summer. So if we're losing all of that and not getting it back, to your point, we feel crummy when we're running. We've never fully hydrated until we get back the sodium that we've lost. So I've actually had quite a few clients come to me very confused by exactly what you're saying. I've been told my whole life I'm not supposed to, take in too much salt. My mom has high blood pressure. My dad has heart disease. I'm trying to watch my salt and ending up in really bad shape trying to train over the summer and not getting in enough salt, because if day in and day out we're losing sodium from sweat, and then our daily diet is very, very low in sodium, the very clean diets. I don't eat processed food. We're not getting enough in. And then people end up, feeling horrific while they're trying to train through the summer.
Okay, so I'm going to take a guess from here. We talk about when you're preparing to run for a marathon or getting, to race day, you need to load up on carbs, and carbs are now our friend again. Those were said to be bad, and now we're saying, no, those are good for performance. And after the race, we cut down on some of the carbs that we're eating so that we can level back out because we're not expending that energy. I'm going to guess temperature, sweat, all that stuff is the same thing with salt. So as we go into the winter, maybe we don't need as many salty sports drinks. Maybe we don't need to supplement our salt intake just because we're not losing as much sodium through sweat. Is that correct?
100% correct. Yeah. So we can lean off the scratch hyperhydration, the liquid IV, the LMNTs, all that stuff. We can probably relax on those types of things over the winter if we're not sweating as much. Now, if we're training on a treadmill and sweating buckets, maybe not, right? But, to your point, yeah, the amount of salt we need is directly related to how much we sweat.
Yeah. And I think because I'm lazy, I like to have one rule for everything. It's okay, carbs are good, carbs all the time. Salt is okay, salt all the time. And now I'm realizing, no, I got to kind of adjust dials. And I don't love doing, but I get it.
Adjusting dials is absolutely what it is, right? But the same thing with carbs, like we scale them up with increased mileage, we scale them down during recovery. So same kind of thing with salt.
Cool. So you're going to say the government is wrong. We should eat some salt if you're running and sweating.
I mean, the government's not wrong. It's just that, like we said, I mean, runners are special. Like we're different. We have different rules.
So before we dive into our listener question, let's talk about our sponsor, Inside Tracker. Thomas, what is Inside Tracker?
Funny you should ask. Inside Tracker is an ultra-personalized nutrition platform that uses blood work to create one-of-a-kind, science-backed action plan to help you reach your potential for better performance and a longer, healthier life.
Yeah, so they were founded in 2009, and the Boston company first started working with professional athletes who wanted to see what their biomarkers, hormone, and mineral profiles look like during their training and how they could use nutrition and lifestyle to improve.
Get this, they measure over 30 biomarkers and recommend food and supplements to optimize things like your energy, cognition, endurance, heart health, and more. And
the really great news for you all is for a limited time, Inside Tracker is offering our listeners 25% off their entire store.
Boom.
Just go to insidetracker.com/fuel. All right, should we play our audio file from Tom?
I think so.
Because he's got a great voice. Let's do it.
Hi guys, it's Tom here from Falmouth in Cornwall in England. I suppose this question is related to alcohol and running. I'm not a massive drinker, but sometimes through the week after a long day or of a weekend, like a few beers or a glass of wine, as it's leading up to a big race, I tend to try and cut that back quite a lot. I was just wondering whether or not I should be totally removing alcohol maybe a month out, 2 weeks out, or whether the odd beer after work's not really going to make that much difference. I suppose kind of how much alcohol does it take to negatively affect race day performance? That's it really. Thanks so much. And thanks for a great podcast. Bye.
All right, so his voice is lovely.
Yes.
I will agree with Megan. He could be like Stuart Little in like if he was reading the voice in a book. I like it. I'm gonna jump in right here and say, hey, this sounds like a dial question again, just like salt and carbs.
Yeah, I agree. And also, let's all just go grab a beer with Tom. He sounds fun.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's a dial thing. And then also, to me, there's not a more personal decision about whether you want to choose to drink alcohol or not. I think, there's a lot of movements with runners that no one should drink, everyone should drink. Like, I think it should be people's own choice. Like, we drink alcohol if we want to, but if we don't want to, we don't have to. So I think, there's not a ton of studies on alcohol and runners, because what research board is going to allow us to give people alcohol in a study? Like, it's just not something that we have tons of information on, like true research on. So we just kind of have principles as to like alcohol could affect us this way, that way, this way, or affect this. But I think so much of it goes back to how we respond to it, right? We all have different tolerances to alcohol. We all have different, thoughts about alcohol. So I think it's really important that we figure out what amount of alcohol impacts our training and where is that threshold, and what are our quote unquote, I hate the word rules, but like, kind of what rules are we going to hold of, like, are there certain days we're going to drink, or are there certain times we're not going to drink, or are we going to take a look at this? Is this hindering our performance? Is it not? And I think there's no steadfast rule as far as you can only drink this much to be successful with your training, because it's so personalized, it's so individualized. And that's something that maybe takes a little bit of trial and error if that's something you want to do while in a training cycle, and just kind of play around with it.
What about specifically his question about the timing of a race? So I know, like, I worked with you and I ran my sub-3, and I was drinking not a lot, but throughout the whole training cycle. And I stopped the week before.
Can I take a stab at this one before we get the professional advice, just so I can see if I can guess it? Is there anything that shows that alcohol helps running? Is there a benefit from drinking?
Not that I have found, right, is that there perhaps is not a benefit, which that's where a lot of people that say no one should be drinking while they're training are coming from. They're like, well, what is the benefit, Megan? Right? And you're right.
Well,
There's
here
great research. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to disagree that there's not a benefit. I'm going to say that for some people who have nerves, anxiety, or pre-race jitters and stuff like that, a glass of wine, a beer, a small amount of alcohol, if it relaxes you and takes away some of the negative energy that you're creating psychologically, and some people say don't use alcohol to treat, that kind of stuff. But I'm not talking about someone drowning their, denial of their life that they haven't done the training and then they drink 20 beers so that they're not worried about it. I'm talking about a glass of wine, a glass of something that helps that person relax into the thing. I got to say that would be the only benefit I could see to having maybe like I said, a glass of wine or a beer.
Absolutely. And to kind of piggyback off that is, one of the things that we have to talk about a lot with runners is just moderation. So moderation in our thought towards training, towards nutrition, towards alcohol, right? Like as Americans, we are very extreme on one side or the other of an equation. And I think alcohol can fall into that too, right? Like we don't have to completely cut out, quote unquote junk food when we're training. Like there's room for all of these types of things. And if we keep some moderation in our life, we are usually happier, calmer, more stable people. And if moderation also includes some alcohol throughout our training, to your point, Thomas, like there shouldn't be anything wrong with including something like that.
Yeah. And I will tell you this, after following Jordan Trope around Baltimore, Chicago, and Boston, and seeing what the man eats and how he does nutrition, you're right. It really is individual because, he pretty much eats, like, I wouldn't consider it. How would you describe?
You would not expect someone at his level to be so casually eating like Olive Garden, Subway, like doesn't like Light and Fit yogurt before his marathon. Like none of it makes sense, but it works for him.
Yeah,
I'm so fascinated by this. Next time, take me along, and I'm going to like keep a journal of what he's eating and like you do some sort of,
It was pretty amazing. Like you see all these people stress about nutrition and what they're eating, what they're drinking before a marathon. Just see somebody be like, well, look, I know I need carbs. I'll just eat Olive Garden. I like the breadsticks. I like the pasta, like copious amounts. And then, yeah, it didn't seem like there was much concern. It was like when we talk about macros on the show, it's more like, okay, I know this has stuff that will fuel my energy. It doesn't matter that it's not from Whole Foods and clean and organic and all that. It's just like, like you say, calories are calories kind of thing. And I feel like you're right. There's no hard and fast rule as far as what's going to, get someone to the start line if having a beer or something makes somebody feel confident and strong getting to the start line. I can't imagine one beer is going to ruin your day.
Right. I totally agree. And I think, back to Jordan for a second is he's a genetic phenom, right? And what I have found working with athletes of all levels is the more genetically gifted an athlete is, yes, they need to eat enough, but like, are they really going to get some crazy, crazy edge from like truly dialing in their nutrition? They're just genetically ridiculously gifted, right? And then someone like myself, not that genetically gifted, I got to nail my nutrition if I want to try to keep up, right? So I think it's just kind of interesting to see people at his level, which there aren't many at his level, right? But it's just crazy to see.
Like when I was in my 20s, I didn't gain weight. Nothing happened. And then all of a sudden metabolism kind of shifted and things changed a little bit. So I also think to a certain degree, there's a blessing of youth.
Right. And, listening to you guys interview him, we train our bodies to be able to do X, Y, and Z. He's trained his body to eat a massive meal and go out and run, right? Because he couldn't eat all day in the OR. So he's trained his body to handle nutrition a little bit differently than maybe we would recommend, but it works for him because he's used to it.
And I will say, as far as alcohol consumption goes, that I pretty much take off the week before a marathon, which isn't because I totally believe that like I need to go to church that week before and be all saintly. It's more the fact that if I did have a bad run, I want to eliminate
The what ifs.
yeah. So if I can, like, I don't need a beer that week. I don't need a glass, a martini or something. I'll just cruise through that week. And, it's one less thing to worry about leading up to the race.
Right. I mean, running's mental, right? So whatever gets us in the best mental headspace leading up to a race, we do. So to Tom's question, like, do I cut out alcohol a week or 2 weeks before a race? If that's what makes you feel your sharpest and feel your best, then by all means, let's do it. Right. But if a couple glasses of wine, a few days out from your race spread out, is what gets you in the best mental space, then there's probably nothing wrong with that either. I mean, I always recommend, like, maybe we don't drink the night before. Like you said, some people have one to help, like, calm nerves. So if that's your thing and you're used to it, that's fine. But, I think we're just careful because it is a diuretic, right? It can cause dehydration. So if we've worked our tail off to get ourselves to retain some fluid and sodium and carbs, like, let's not do anything to negate that. But again, I mean, I think it's just that mental piece of it too.
Meg, what was your pre-race before we started working with Feathers? What was your pre-race ritual?
It was the worst. I would have 2 to 3 glasses of wine and a burger before my marathons.
Stop. Wait, I don't think I knew that.
A lot of times I would drink less than Megan, which is the opposite of most times. I would drink less than Megan the night before a marathon, where she might have 2 or 3 glasses of wine. I'd have like 1 beer, maybe 2 beers.
Was it chilling out your nerves? Do you think that's why you did it?
Oh, it's 100% why.
Yeah.
So it worked for that. But I think we know now the dehydration factor clearly played a role. And
yeah, why were you getting leg cramps?
I eliminated that for that exact reason.
And then we didn't get leg cramps. So, I mean, that was a piece of it, right? There were other things we played with.
Sure.
But it's all those little things that come together. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking before we started recording about how a couple studies came out recently saying that athletes and specifically runners tend to be drinkers, heavy drinkers. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it was actually really crazy. Looking at this research study, it was saying that the more highly fit you are, the more likely you are to be a moderate to heavy drinker. Like, they actually used people's VO2 max when they were looking at this. So they were literally looking at how fit people were and how this compared back, which I thought was like totally fascinating. So fit women are twice as likely to drink, and fit men are 63% more likely to drink more. So, I mean, that's huge, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple, how many factors are in here? If you're extremely fit, you're probably social. You like going out. You're probably going to go drink when you do that. Also, I think a lot of people get into fitness so that they can have their drinks and have their foods that they want. So it all kind of adds up together that, you work out in excess, you maybe drink in excess, you kind of live in excess.
Yeah. And, when you look at this research, they have kind of 2 theories. And one of the theories is it like I did something, quote unquote, good for myself so I can have something, quote unquote, bad. So there was that thought. So kind of what you're saying, Thomas. But then the other thought that I tend to think this is the reason more is they've looked at personality traits. So the type of people that are good athletes or are good runners, and then the type of people that tend to like to drink. And what it found was that these people had a higher level of sensation seeking traits. So maybe it's more so like an innate trait of things that if you really like to run absurd distances at absurd paces, you really like to drink alcohol, like they just kind of go hand in hand.
I think my deterrent from drinking is probably related to sleep. Like, I feel like I know I don't feel as rested if I drink the night before. And I know through going through marathon training, like how that not only affects your running, but just like the rest of your day and like your productivity. So I know there is no like great studies on alcohol and running performance, but in general, what does alcohol do to our running? And then if we are going to be drinking, like, how can we fit it into our training? Like, what days are a hard no and what days are maybe okay?
Right. And I think, it's good to, we're joking around about alcohol and stuff, but I mean, it is good. Like there are some negative things from it that we want to be aware of, right? So to your point, sleep. So we don't get as restful of sleep. Like obviously we all probably know if we drink, we fall asleep really fast, but like the quality of sleep is kind of crummy. So to your point, you wake up feeling crummy, feeling unrested. I think one of the biggest things for performance, especially over the summer, is dehydration. So we know the higher the alcohol content in whatever we're drinking, the more likely we are to become dehydrated. It's a diuretic. We're going to lose some of the fluid that our body was already hanging on to when we drink that alcohol. So, if we've got a big workout, if we've got a long run the next day, if it's going to be in the heat, like we're going to feel more dehydrated if we've drank the night before. So, just trying to stay on top of that. Or then if we're drinking after a race from a recovery standpoint, we're already dehydrated. Now we're drinking. We need to drink a ton more fluid to make up for those losses. So just kind of understanding the sleep, the hydration. There are some studies that if we drink after exercise, it decreases muscle protein synthesis. So that's a fancy word for recovery. So like our muscles aren't going to recover quite as quickly if we're drinking heavily after running, right? If we're having a cocktail or two, I mean, I have not seen research to show that necessarily decreases that recovery. It's just like heavy drinking. And then there is some studies too to show that if we're drinking post-race, we're probably not eating well post-race, which means we're delaying recovery from like a glycogen, resynthesis standpoint and those types of things. So I guess, all of these things, yes, could potentially add up to be very performance tanking. But if we're cautious about understanding these pieces and timing it right and eating enough and staying hydrated, we're going to minimize those effects to our training and figure out how we can fit this in if this is something we still want to do while we're training.
We made it so that I never had a drink a night before a long run or a night before a hard workout. And then we limited it to like 2 nights a week. So it was sort of up to me when to place it in there. But is that pretty much what you recommend for everyone?
I do. I think we need to be strategic with it when we're in a training block, when we're in a training cycle. Like if alcohol is important and we want to keep it in, right? Where do we put that in? So if we don't drink the night before a big workout, if we don't drink the night before a long run, we're going to be setting ourselves up for better success and performance during that. And that's when it matters. That's when we're gaining the most fitness. If we go in dehydrated without enough sleep and feeling crummy, like our form's probably going to fall apart, would that increase injury risk? I don't know, maybe, so it's just being kind of strategic about when we're consuming alcohol, just so that we're setting ourselves up for success.
All right, guys, jumping in here to remind you about our sponsor, Inside Tracker.
So if you're listening before you know already, they measure over 30 biomarkers and recommend food, supplements to optimize things like energy, cognition, endurance, heart health, and more.
And for a limited time, Inside Tracker is offering our listeners 25% off their entire store. Just go to insidetracker.com/fuel.
Do it.
Okay, let's transition a little bit from alcohol to junk food, because that was the other question we got. And it was sort of like how, or is it okay to include junk food in your training? And like, will it derail you, or is there a way to strategically eat junk food? So
yeah, I mean, junk food is like, each person defines that for themselves, right? So I don't think there's any, but yeah, to you guys' point, more of the highly processed, highly palatable little Debbie snack cakes and fast food and all that kind of stuff. And again, I think, the thing that this has in common with alcohol is moderation. So, as boring and womp womp as that word is, I really think nothing should ever be eliminated unless we're allergic to it. So when people are saying like, I can't eat this or I can't eat that, I get really concerned, right? So there's a lot of runners that are very black and white with their thinking. And, in the long term, that's not the best strategy. So I really try to get people to, all right, what are some of these foods that maybe we'd classify as quote unquote junk food?
Donuts.
Donuts, right? That you like. And if those are things that we want to figure out how to include, then let's include them. Otherwise, you're going to face plant in a dozen donuts and eat them all and feel ill if you don't let yourself eat them for your 12-week training cycle. So, I think it's important to know, like, I don't want people carb loading on donuts, right? Because they're so high in fat. and not enough carbs, truthfully, to really get the job done. You're just going to feel ill, and then you're not going to get enough carbs. So, if you want a donut, then eat it after, right? So that you're enjoying the donut, but you're still getting your carbs in beforehand. Or, I have a client that pushes 2 kids in a double stroller to the bakery every weekend, and they all pick out what they want and they run home and they have it. It's like a social thing for them. It's like fun. It's like an activity that they do together. And, I think it's things like that like you just make it fit in, but you're strategic about it. So, it's not something that we're doing every single meal. Obviously that's going to derail our final goals. But, if it's something that is part of our lifestyle and we really enjoy and it makes us happy, who cares if it's not the healthiest food? If we want to include it, sometimes we include it sometimes.
So does it make sense to think that this junk food that we're eating should be sort of as far away from our workouts and runs as possible? So like we don't want to eat them right before and we don't want to eat them right after our runs, but like, a dessert after dinner or something like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to put it for sure, because we've talked about the intentionality of what do we eat the night before, what do we eat right before, what do we eat right after to recover. And, if we're trying to dial those things in, we might need to be more intentional about what we're choosing to make sure we get enough protein, we get enough carbs, and then enjoy some of those, things at other times. I think that's probably a good recommendation. I say probably because my last training cycle, we used to get this Lucci's pizza that was in Kent, and it's like the best pizza ever. It's like New York style pizza. So it's like the thin crust. So there's not a ton of cheese. So it's not super greasy, but like a decent amount of carbs, right? We used to get that after swimming lessons for the kids every Friday. So I ate that before every single long run for 12 weeks, and it was great because it was mostly carbs. So I guess some people might say, oh, that's junk food, it's pizza, but it worked great. It wasn't too high in fat. It was lots of simple carbs. You don't really need protein the night before. You want the carbs. So it worked. So I guess, it's just trying to make sure you're getting what you need.
Someone needs to make a sport ice cream.
I think that's probably what they call Halo Top, but that stuff is junk, man. Ugh.
Oh, but you
guys
know
ever
what?
tried that?
Yeah, we were into it for a while, but here's the thing: it's like $5 a pint.
It's so expensive,
and that was with a coupon.
And it kind of had like a weird, like that fake sugary taste.
It does. There's sugar alcohols and artificial sweeteners and.
Okay, let's run through a few of these questions that people wrote into you. I think you can probably answer most of these pretty quickly. Does beer help with recovery?
Probably not. Thomas, you can lend your advice.
It makes recovery much easier to get through.
They actually did do a study on this where they compared electrolyte drinks, water, milk, and I think beer was in there. And as long as it was like under 4% alcohol, I think it actually did stimulate glycogen resynthesis, and it had to be like a lower alcohol percent beer.
If I pair junk food with a healthy meal, are we in the clear?
Well, that's a vague question because that's like, did you eat a box of Kentucky Fried Chicken with some asparagus? Like, what is this pairing?
That one's a little too vague.
I think probably what they're going for here is like if we eat like a handful of Skittles by themselves, it's going to shoot our blood sugar up and drop it, right? And maybe that's not going to leave us feeling very good. But like if we ate a handful of Skittles at the end of dinner, we probably wouldn't feel that way. So I'm thinking that's what they meant.
If you've got a handful of Skittles, here's what's happening. You're eating your healthy meal, and then afterwards you're going to the cupboard and you're like, some Skittles. Who has Skittles in their house? I guess a lot of people with Halloween coming up.
Why does my body crave sugar on rest days?
I know this one.
What is it, Thomas?
I think that we have carb depletion, and your body is like, hey, let's get carbs in there. The fastest way that we can get those is a sweet tooth. So you go, boom, I want that. I also think it's funny, when I first started cutting back on alcohol, I found the nights that I wasn't drinking, I would crave sweet stuff. So I think it was trying to replace that insulin bump I was getting from either the alcohol or something like that. Am I close?
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. So I was going to say, if you're craving sugar like crazy at any time in your training cycle, you're probably not eating enough carbs. So you're absolutely right. That's kind of our body's response to like underfueling. So when people say like, oh, I can't eat sugar, it just, makes me want it more and makes me crave it more. It's probably not actually the sugar. It's probably that we're not eating enough, carbs in particular. And then it's interesting you say that. So one of my old coworkers was actually a dietitian in like a rehab unit, like almost like a house where like females went after they were out of, rehab. And she said they all used to spend all their stipend money on candy, that they had like a very high, palate for sweets, and they always wanted like sweets and things like that, to replace the alcohol or the drugs or things like that. So there has to be something to that.
Yeah, I'm not a sweet person. Like I said earlier, I'm a savory guy. And it's funny when I cut back on alcohol, or like say I'm taking a week off or whatever, I notice that I do start to crave more sweet.
I'm training for a half marathon and eat close to 300 to 360 grams of carbs daily. However, since I started trying to eat a little more because I'm being in peak week, I've noticed I've been craving carbs more than I ever had before. So I've been eating them. Is that normal? Why would I crave more carbs when I think I'm eating enough?
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, probably we need more, or a timing perspective. Like maybe we're going too long without eating and then eating tons of carbs, right? So it could be a timing, like distribution of energy throughout the day. But truthfully, if you're like nailing timing, eating enough before, eating enough during, eating enough after, and you're still having those cravings, if we're getting enough protein, right? If everything is kind of dialed in our nutrition, then our body's telling us we're not getting enough to support the intensity and the mileage that we're running. So yeah, absolutely eat more. I think that's why sometimes numbers can be dangerous, because it like makes us second guess what our body's trying to tell us. But yeah, lean on what our body's telling us, and you'll stay healthier and run better.
I like this question. Are there, quote, better alcohol choices?
I get that question a lot. And honestly, like, we drink what we enjoy drinking. So I have a lot of people who love craft beer and they want to lose weight. Craft beer is like a caloric bomb, right? There's like 400, 500, 600 calories in a 16-ounce craft beer. I mean, they're unbelievable. So, I mean, if we're drinking 3 of those, like we're probably going to have trouble changing our body composition. But at the same time, if we only like craft beer, then maybe we just drink less of what we like, even though it's a caloric bomb. Or, same thing. Some people love seltzers. Cool. Right. But, like, let's not drink 6 of them. So I think it's just trying to figure out what we like. I mean, a lot of people want to know like, what's the lowest.
That's crazy, because you can drink as much tequila as you want. Like, it doesn't have a lot of calories.
You can do whatever you want, Thomas.
Yeah. Tequila.
I love it.
You could have one craft beer or a bottle of tequila. It's up to you.
Exactly. It's equal. Not in alcohol, but yeah.
In calories.
But yeah, no, I mean, people, obviously, if you mix liquor with like a non-caloric beverage or drink it straight, that's going to be lower in calories. A lot of people do like light beers or seltzers or wine because that is lower in sugar than like mixed drinks. So, there's obviously all of that if we're looking at like total calories. But truthfully, I think it's just being mindful of the amount and then what you like, because if you don't like what you're drinking, you're probably going to drink more, right? Like same thing with dessert, like just eat what we want and we're going to eat less and be satisfied and move on. So kind of same concept with alcohol.
I like this one too. They wrote, red wine helps me recover. Tell me it's true.
Thomas, did you submit that one?
No, I actually, I would have gone for Tito's. But,
Tito's helps me recover. I mean, I just want to say it's true to make him happy, truthfully. No, I mean, again, the amount, right? Like a certain amount of it with good hydration, good food is absolutely not going to, monopolize our recovery.
Okay, a couple more questions and then we'll wrap this up. How do you negate the effect of dehydration from alcohol?
Water. I had a client who was putting, was it Noon or Liquid IV with her tequila on the beach for a vacation one time. And I was like, well, at least we're working on that hydration.
I did Tailwind in vodka one time, and that was pretty good.
Is there like a rule, like for every drink we have, we should drink, I don't know, so many ounces of water?
Yeah, no, I think that's it. I remember we were talking about this before, and I was trying to look up like exactly how much fluid we lose from alcohol, and it was kind of hard to find. But I mean, typically we say if we alternate, so like for every drink we have, if we try to have like 6 to 8 ounces of fluid in between, that can help. And then, too, if we're really trying to rehydrate quickly, the sodium helps. So that's why there's so many higher sodium electrolyte drinks out right now. So if you could add, something like that in, that would help rehydrate you even faster.
And don't forget the IV bags that we talked about.
Yes, true. There's always those.
Did you guys see that Pedialyte has come out with like a sports Pedialyte? I don't know if that's new or
I did see that.
It's been around, but I know that people have been using that to rehydrate and cure hangovers for a while. So it's interesting that it's Pedialyte Sport. It's one of those times where you're like, you should rebrand to change it. Like it shouldn't be Pedialyte anymore.
Right.
But I think because they have a strong market of people that are like, I use Pedialyte to rehydrate. They're like, yeah, okay, great.
It's funny you say that. I noticed they had that at our gas station this week. Like when I went in to get something to drink, I was like, oh, Pedialyte
Did you get it?
Gas station? No, but I will next time. Let you know how it tastes.
I just looked it up while we were talking, and they have some bold claims on here.
What are they?
It will rapidly rehydrate with advanced science.
I love drinking science.
Wait, you know what that rapid rehydration science is? If we have sodium and sugar with our water, we absorb it faster. You guys already all know that. Yeah.
I like it.
There's 490 milligrams of sodium in a bottle. So that's pretty high, right?
How big's the bottle?
12 ounces.
12 ounces.
Yeah. Yeah, that is pretty high. That's more than scratch. Yeah.
All right. So let's wrap this up with Tom's question being sort of the center, and do you need to give up drinking during training and or before a race?
Or how soon?
What can you, just a quick little summary?
I think we need to take into consideration our own alcohol habits, right? And are these helping or hindering? Retooling those for training. And then I do think that we should proactively cut back leading into a race. So whether that's a week out, 2 weeks out, I think some people even do a month out, but just thinking about like, again, mentally, how do we feel our sharpest? How do we feel our best? And what does that look like? And really just trying to stick to that for, better performance, better sleep, better hydration, and all those types of things. But, I think everybody probably sees from our point, we don't think, unless you want to cut back or cut out alcohol, that you shouldn't feel like you have to from a performance standpoint.
All right. Perfect. Tom, thank you for your question.
And,
thanks to everyone
and
listening.
your lovely voice.
And your lovely accent. If you have a question, you can go to the Anchor app and send us an audio file, or you can email us at fuelforthesoulpodcast@gmail.com. All right. We'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Bye, feathers.